So one of the strongest memories that I have when I was younger in college was a car accident that my only sibling, my sister, was in the summer of 1980, right before my third year. And I had gone to work in Washington, D.C. With a friend of mine, and I was just working as a waiter and a bartender for a fun summer in Washington between my second and third year of college. And I still remember that day. It was in early July, and we didn't have cell phones back then, so the phone in the apartment was ringing almost every hour starting about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was sure they were trying to call me into work, and it was a night that I wanted to be off, and so I wasn't going to answer the phone. But every hour the phone rang. And finally, I think it was around 7 o'clock, I thought, well, they can't possibly call me in now, so I'm going to go ahead and answer the phone. So I answered the phone, and it was my stepfather. And he told me that my sister had been in a very bad car accident and that I needed to get down to Tallahassee. She was a student at Florida State. I needed to get down to Tallahassee immediately. And so I remember hanging up the phone, calling Eastern Airlines, getting a flight, leaving early the next morning for the plane and landing in Tallahassee, being picked up by my sister's roommate, who told me, Alan, it's really bad. That's why your mother couldn't talk to you last night. And so we went to the hospital, to the emergency room, and everyone was in the waiting room. Her then fiance, now husband of 30-some years, her roommate, her roommate's boyfriend, who was a Florida state trooper, and then my parents. And I could see from my mother's face when I walked in the room that this was not good. So I remember finally when they said we could go in and see her. I went in and she was laying in the ER with tube down her throat, eyes closed. She was in a coma. And you could see the residual of the accident. It was pretty bad. It had been in a head-on collision. And so we walked back out again because she was not conscious or able to communicate. And I remember at one point the doctor came out and began to talk to us about when it would be necessary to turn off life support, if it turned out that she was brain dead. And it's funny, it's still hard for me to talk about. I haven't talked about this in a long time. And so I remember at one point the nurse coming out, this was over the course of a couple of days, and asking frantically if she knew sign language. My sister knew sign language, and we all went, no, we don't think so. And turned out what she was doing is with her right hand, she was starting to try to communicate with her hands, and actually sign language she had learned when she was a Girl Scout, and she remembered it all those years later. One of the real strong memories I have of that was going back into the ER at one point when we could see her during very brief periods. She was still unconscious, and my mother leaned in close to her and said, my sister always called me her baby brother, and my mother said, your baby brother's here. And my sister, although in a coma, reached up with her left hand, grabbed a hold of me, and pulled me down on top of her. And of course, everybody in the room obviously freaked out. And the interesting reason I bring that up is one of the residual impacts of that accident is she can't use her left arm at all, and yet she used it in that one moment, the only time she was ever able to use it since the accident. But I quit my job in Washington that summer in July and came down to Tallahassee because I had to take her to physical therapy every day so she could regain the use of some of her body. And she did ultimately regain the use of everything except her left arm. And that time, we were always extremely close, but that summer, taking her to physical therapy every day, living with her, helping her recover, really formed an extraordinary bond between the two of us that exists to this day. I mean, I'm 57, she's 59. She lives in Washington. She would go on to have 2 children, a wonderful life. But that accident, I remember watching her with such great pride as she recovered from it, because here's somebody who'd been a cheerleader and, a very beautiful woman and had gone through something horrible. And yet I remember when she had my nephew, her first child, watching her without any sense of hesitation bend down to tie his shoe by using her right arm and her mouth. And watching my sister tie a shoelace with her mouth and her hand is not something I had ever thought even anybody could do. And I guess the last thing I would say is I would periodically in those first few years, I would be in the middle of my day, and I would stop and say, okay, for the rest of the day, try to only use one hand. And it was fascinating to me how many things I'm so used to doing because I have 2 hands that I couldn't do at all. And then again, having such admiration for how she had navigated through that change that happened in her life one morning when she was 21 years old, and has been with her now for 30 years. And she's been remarkably successful as an extraordinary woman, and as I say, a mother of 2 now grown children. And watching her persevere from something and never feeling sorry for herself and never doubting her ability, really I gained such great respect, even more than I had before that day.